Chapter 28. What Pete Told Sammy. No words were spoken by either Sammy or her lover while their horses were climbing the mill road, and both were glad when they reached the top of the ridge and turned into the narrow path where they would need to ride, one before the other. It was not so easy to ride side by side when each was busy with thoughts not yet to be spoken. At the gate, Ollie dismounted to help the girl from her horse, but before he could reach the pony's side, Sammy sprang lightly to the ground, unassisted. Opening the big gate, she turned Brownie loose in the yard, while the man stood watching her, a baffled look upon his face. He had always done these little things for her. To be refused at this time was not pleasant. The feeling was that he was on the outside grew stronger. Turning to his own horse, Ollie placed his foot in the stirrup to mount when Sammy spoke. Perhaps she felt she had been a little unkind. "You're going to stay for supper?" she said. "Not tonight," he answered, gaining a seat in the saddle and picking up the reins. "But you are going in the morning, aren't you not? You mustn't go off like this." He dropped the reins to the horse's neck again. "Look here, Sammy. Do you blame me because I didn't fight that big bully?" Sammy didn't reply. "What could I do? You know there's not another man in the mountains beside young Matt who could have done it. Surely you cannot blame me." The young man moved uneasily. "No, certainly not. I don't blame you in the least, but It was very fortunate that young Matt was there, wasn't it?" The last sentence slipped out before she knew. Ollie retorted angrily. "It seems to be very fortunate for him. He'll be a greater hero than ever now, I suppose. If he is wise, he'll stay in the backwoods to be worshipped, where he'll find that his size won't count for much in the world. He's a great man here where he can fight like a beast, but his style won't go far where brains are of much value. It would be interesting to see him in town, a man who never saw a railroad." Sammy lifted her head quickly at this and fixed her eyes at the man's face with that wide, questioning gaze that reminded one so of her father. "I never saw a railroad either. Not that I can remember, though. I suppose we must have crossed one or two on our way to Texas when I was a baby. Is it the railroads that makes one so superior?" The man turned impatiently in the saddle. "You know what I mean." "Yes," she answered slowly. "I think I do know what you mean." Ollie lifted the reins again from his horse's neck and fingered them nervously. "I better go on now. There's no use talking about this tonight. I won't leave in the morning as I'd planned. I can't go like this." There was a little catch in his voice. "May I come again tomorrow afternoon, Sammy?" "Yeah. You better go now and come back tomorrow." "And Sammy, won't you try and think that I'm not altogether worthless, even if I'm not big enough to fight Wash Gibbs? You are sure that you do not blame me for what happened at the mill?" "No, of course not. You couldn't help it. Why should I blame anyone for what he cannot help?" Then Ollie rode away, and Sammy, going to her pony, stood petting the little horse while she watched her lover up the old trail, and still there, and that wide, questioning look was in her eyes. As Ollie passed from sight around the hills above, the girl slipped out of the gate, and a few minutes later stood at the lookout where she could watch her lover ride along the ridge. She saw him pass from the open into the fringe of timber beyond the big gap, and a few minutes later saw him reappear beyond the deer lick. Still she watched as he moved along the rim of the hollow, looking in the distance like a toy man on a toy horse, watching until he'd gone from sight into the timber again and then was gone. And all the time that questioning look was in her eyes. Did she blame Ollie that he had played so poorly his part in the scene at the mill? No, she told herself over and over again, as though repeating a lesson. No, Ollie was not to be blamed, but yet she knew that he had spoken truly when he said that there was things that counted for more than just brute strength. But was there not something more than brute strength in the incident? Was there not that which lay deeper, something of which the brute strength, after all, was only an expression? The girl stamped her foot impatiently as she exclaimed aloud, "Oh, why didn't he try to do at least something? He could at least force Wash Gibbs to beat him into insensibility rather than have submitted so tamely at being played with." In the distance she saw the shepherd following his flock down the mountain, and the old scholar, who was always watching the lookout when in the vicinity for a glimpse of his pupil, waved his hand in greeting as he moved slowly on after his charges. It was growing late. Her father, too, would be coming home for his supper. But as she rose to go, a step on the mountainside above caught her attention, and looking up, she saw Pete coming down the big rock. Sammy greeted the youth kindly. "I haven't seen Pete for some days. Where's he been?" "Pete's been everywhere, and of course I've been with him," replied the lad with his wide, sweeping gesture, and then throwing himself a full length at the girl's feet, he said abruptly, "Pete was here that night, and God, he was here too. Couldn't no one else be, but God would have done it. The gun went off bang, and a lot more guns went bang bang all around the mountains, and the moonlight things, they was a dancing quiet, 'cause they was scared, and that panther had just doubled up and died. Matt and Ollie wasn't hurt nary a bit. Pete said it was God that done it. He was sure in the hills that night." Sammy was startled. "Matt and Ollie and a panther? What do you mean?" The troubled look shadowed the delicate face as the lad shook his head. "It don't mean nothing, Sammy. Not me. Nobody can't mean nothing, can they?" "Yeah, but what does Pete say? Does Pete know about it?" "Oh, yeah, of course Pete knows everything. Doesn't Sammy know about that night when God was in the hills?" He was eager now, with eyes wide and face aglow. "No," said Sammy, "I do not. Will Pete tell me about it?" The strange youth seated himself on the rock and facing the valley below said in a low tone, "Ollie was a settin' like this, all still, just a smoking and a watching the moonlight things that was dancing over the tops of the trees down there." Then, leaping to his feet, the boy ran a short ways along the ledge and came stealing back, crouching low as he whispered, "It come a creepin' and a creepin' towards Ollie, and he never knowed nothin' about it. But Matt, he knowed, and God knowed too." Wonderingly, the girl watched his movements, and suddenly he sprang to the rock again and faced the imaginary beast, crying out in childish imitations of a man's deep voice, "Get out of here! This here's my fight." Then, in his own tone, "It was sure scared when young Matt jumped on that rock. Everything's scared of Matt when he talks like that. He was mad, too, 'cause Matt, he wouldn't let it get at Ollie, and he got ready to jump at Matt, and Matt, he got ready for a tussle, and Ollie, he got out of the way, and all the moonlight things stopped dancing, and the shadow things come out to see the fight." He had lowered his voice almost to a whisper, and Sammy was breathless. "Bang!" cried the lad, clapping his hands and shouting the words. "Bang! Bang! God, he fired, and all the guns in the hills went off, and that panther just doubled up and died. It would have sure got Ollie, though, if Matt hadn't a jumped on the rock when he did, but do you reckon it could have got Matt if God hadn't been there that night?" It was all too clearly portrayed to be a mistake. "Sammy needn't be afraid," continued Pete, seeing the look in the girl's face. "It can't come back no more. It just naturally can't, you know, Sammy, 'cause God, he killed it plumb dead. And Pete, he dragged it way over on the other side of the ridge, and the buzzards, they got it." End of chapter 28.